What did I learn from watching the Falcons Week 5 film? We're in for a fun but chaotic Kirk-tober.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, who are helping you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for nearly 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that goes strong with me as everydayers. That means you tune into this podcast to make it your first listen or first watch each and every day. And to become an everydayer, all you have to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, we are reviewing the film from the Falcons Week 5 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Thursday Night Football. And we'll talk about what was behind the Falcons' improved second half defense against the Bucs. We'll talk about Kyle Pitts' redemption. We'll talk about why Darnell Mooney is quieting his skeptics, at least everybody but one. We'll talk about who that is. And we'll start off today's episode talking about Kirk Cousins' big day. And I talked about this on Thursday night. I was interested to sort of see, what I would feel watching the film of this game. Would I come away thinking, the Falcons won this game by the skin of their teeth? And yeah, the film kind of converted, right? It was basically what I said after the game on Thursday on the Rapid Reaction, which was like kind of a bad process for the Falcons, but they got a good result. And watching Kirk Cousins, especially, as we start the illustrious month of Kirk-tober, it was a chaotic performance for Kirk, right? And, I go back to the first 4 weeks where I thought Kirk was, I won't say unfairly maligned, but I felt like people were pointing too much of the blame at Kirk. And, that's just kind of natural when it comes to the quarterback. They get all the credit for the team's success. They get all the blame when the team loses. But I felt like a lot of the criticism that first month about Kirk's inaccuracy, Kirk's questionable decision-making, and yeah, there were certainly definitely moments of that in the first 4 games, but I felt like there were more of those moments in this game, right? I thought more of those moments of inaccuracy, questionable decision-making were on display against the Bucs. And part of that is due to the fact that you drop back to throw the ball 60 plus times, you're going to have more instances of bad throws in terms of the overall percentage, right? They're not all going to be winners when you're dropping back that much. But, it's the first week of Kirk-tober, and it's a solid start to the month of Kirk-tober, but it's probably going to be a chaotic month. And that's just kind of where it goes with Kirk Cousins, right? One of the things I did like in this game was Kirk was willing to be a lot more aggressive than he had been. And that to me is a testament to him getting more comfortable in the offense. And that's one of the things that I've noticed. I can think back to Matt Ryan in his first year in 2015 under Kyle Shanahan's offense and just kind of being like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then in 2016, being a lot more aggressive and, trusting what he was seeing. And I think you saw reflection of that with Kirk being much more willing to trust what he sees. Now, to me, too often that time was like, that trust was like, screw it, Darnell Mooney's down there somewhere. And I don't like that type of mentality specifically to Darnell Mooney. And I'll explain that later in today's episode. But in general, I do like that sort of mentality from Kirk. And I think that is a sign of his growth in this offense. But I think there is going to be some chaotic nature to that sort of thing. It's part of why we have the Kirk Cousins chaos meter. For those of you that are not familiar with that concept, this comes from Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. He bequeathed it to me this offseason when the Falcons picked up Kirk Cousins. And there's 5 levels to the chaos meter. Level 1 is very unchaotic, where no chaos. It's just Kirk being super conservative, which we don't want. Level 2 is Kirk being an effective game manager. Level 3 is peak Kirk. This is where we want to live, right? Level 4 is full chaos, too chaotic for our good, bad Kirk Cousins. And level 5 is the chaos has gotten to such an extent that now we need to have a conversation about, replacing Kirk with Michael Penix. Now, throughout this season, we've been at level 2, level 3, or level 4. And I put officially week 5 at level 3 because a lot of it was level 2 stuff with a lot of level 4 chaos, and it kind of balances out. Like you need that with Kirk to sort of balance out to get the peak Kirk. You need a little chaos with Kirk in order to get peak Kirk, as opposed to just the game manager, because Kirk has a history of sort of being labeled as a game manager. It's the, we have these conversations a lot with quarterbacks, but one way that it's been termed with Kirk Cousins for many years was it's the chef versus the baker type of quarterback, right? And Kirk is that baker type of quarterback that you give him a recipe, he can follow that recipe, he'll bake you a mean pie, a mean cake, or whatever. But like he has to follow these steps, right? It's that sort of notion of, he can't create, he can't go off script, he can't do all those various things. While a chef has a much better feel for the quote unquote artistry of cooking. So like if you have a missing ingredient or someone messes up a step in the recipe, that a baker would, if the baker followed that recipe, that means that baker would mess up the entire cake or pie or whatever. A chef can be able to adjust. He'll figure it out, right? Oh, I don't have this, so I need to adjust this sort of thing. I can still make a good meal even if all the ingredients and all the steps aren't there. If my oven is a little off or whatever, I know how to make those adjustments. That's ideally what you want from a quarterback, is that chef, while Kirk Cousins is more of that baker. And that's why, again, that baker is more naturally that level 2 on the chaos meter, but you just got to tweak a little bit of that chaos to get the sort of peak Kirk Cousins, that can be a little bit more of that chef. And so I know a lot of people are wondering why, or wonder what did I think of Zac Robinson's play calling in this game? Because to me, this is why I've been a lot more critical of Zac Robinson, because of Kirk's bakerness, right? Where it's just like, I know Kirk can bake a mean pie if you give him the right recipe, right? If you put the right structure, the right infrastructure around him, the right weapons, you're having the right play calling. Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell can attest to that, right? And that's one of the reasons why we were so excited about Zac Robinson coming from that same coaching tree. And we're like, okay, well, we can make a mean pie with Kirk Cousins with Zac Robinson. And that's why I've been more critical of Zac Robinson, because I don't know if Zac is necessarily giving him the right steps, the right ingredient through the first 4 weeks. And so coming into this game, did Zac do a better job? Again, I don't know. Like watching the film, I didn't come away being like, man, Zac Robinson is calling a heck of a game, right? But we'll see. We'll see. Again, I think he's making strides. Like I don't think Zac Robinson is a bad play caller by any means, right? I want to make that clear. Like I'm being critical of Zac Robinson, not because I'm blaming him for all the Falcons' issues, right? I think there's a tendency that people want to blame things as opposed to just saying like, hey, this needs to be better, right? For example, like we love playing the blame game. Like Antonio Hamilton would have been getting the blame game all game if the Falcons didn't win this game, right? He did not have a good night, and people would have gone hard on him if the Falcons lost this game. And it's funny because it's like, you go back 2 months and people were like, shouldn't Antonio Hamilton start for the Falcons at cornerback? Because, at that point in time, nobody believed in Mike Hughes, and all those takes have not aged particularly well because Mike Hughes is off to a good start this year. Antonio Hamilton crashed and burned on Thursday, although to be fair to Antonio Hamilton, I don't know if playing him as a nickel cornerback is the best way to suit his skill set, right? I get why the Falcons did it because, he can actually tackle. Unlike their other, options in terms of Clark Phillips and T. Alford, but it didn't work out well. But we'll see on that front. But all that to say is I think Zac Robinson is moving in the right direction. I don't know if Thursday night was some great leap forward. Same thing with Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk is moving in the right direction. A healthy amount of chaos. We'll see with Kirk, but it's Kirk-tober, so we're hope springs eternal on that front. But talking about preseason takes that didn't age well. Talking about Antonio Hamilton versus Mike Hughes. One particular preseason take that some people were out there saying, hey, Darnell Mooney isn't a number 2 wide receiver. Aaron, you said that, didn't you? Some of you guys are thinking that, and yeah, I did say that. And now you're sitting there going, but he's proven to be kind of our number 1 wide receiver. And I'm like, let's pump the brakes on that. And let's talk about that, where the Darnell Mooney-ness sort of fits. And we'll break down what he showed on Thursday night as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Now, guys, NFL teams spend all summer trying to find the right professionals to fit their roster. And you're going to do the same this fall with your small business. But it's so much easier for you than sweating it out in training camp because you have LinkedIn Jobs who are going to have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just any old job board. They will help you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for new jobs, but just might be open for the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn and join the 2.5 million small businesses that use LinkedIn for hiring by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And I asked, what is something that scares you? Now, during this time of year with Halloween, we can have a lot of fun with some of the scary things like zombies and ghosts and whatnot. But therapy can be a great tool for discovering what are the real fears, and finding ways to overcome them. And therapy has taught me positive coping skills like you can only control what you can control, which I use every single Sunday when I'm watching the Atlanta Falcons and sometimes on Thursday. And it's going to help empower me to be the best version of myself. And therapy isn't just for those people that have experienced major trauma. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So let's talk about Darnell Mooney, right? Who's off to an excellent start this season. He currently, through 5 games, he's on pace to have 81 catches, over 1,100 yards, and 10 touchdowns this year, far outpacing my projections for him at the beginning of the season, which was like 56 catches, 710 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And so far this year, he's been an excellent number 2 wide receiver. You're seeing it with the explosive plays, 8 of them so far, which is on pace for 27 this year, outpacing several Julio Jones years when it came to those explosive 20-plus yard plays. And I think beating out, the best season Ridley had in Atlanta was 23 in 2020. So clearly Darnell Mooney is looking like the explosive monster receiver that the Falcons really haven't had since Julio Jones. So clearly Darnell Mooney is the guy. But you know me, right? Like, we're hanging out at the party, right? I got to go to the bathroom, but I see a punch bowl over there, and I can walk the 50 feet to the bathroom, or I can walk the 5 feet over to that punch bowl, and we have a perfectly good punch bowl. And so, I'm going to be me. So basically my thing with Darnell Mooney is, I think he has a very specific skill set. I think the Falcons have done a good job through these first 5 games, maximizing that skill set. Now, I don't know if my personal opinion is like that skill set is the ideal number 2 wide receiver for me, but to each their own, right? And so, like, to me, what that skill set gets manifested often on the field is, those deep outs, those intermediate crossers. Those are the plays that Darnell Mooney is really good at making. The things that Darnell Mooney's not so good at making is, sometimes he's body catching some passes, which leads to some drops like we saw on Thursday night. The swing and screen passes, you've heard me complain about that before. He's not really a guy that's a creator with the ball in his hands. And unfortunately, on Thursday night, the Falcons decided they wanted to throw a lot of back shoulder throws to Darnell Mooney, and those are things that Darnell Mooney, he's not good at positioning himself between the ball and defender because he's not the biggest guy in the world, and making contested catches and whatnot. But you did see that one, contested catch from Darnell Mooney on that touchdown where he went up and got the football. But like outside of that one play, like most of the time when you saw Kirk Cousins throw the ball to Darnell Mooney and he didn't catch it were the plays and routes that I'm talking about that he's not particularly good at. And to me, kind of that one catch that he did have where he went up and got it was kind of like the worst thing that could happen because it kind of emboldened Kirk and the rest of this offense, the rest of the game, to basically like, oh, Darnell Mooney I can just throw it up and he can make the play. And it's just like, no, like he did it that one time. And it's like, I don't know if he's going to do it reliably, right? Where the touchdown was Kirk threw it basically in the triple coverage. He had no business throwing it. That's what we're talking about, the chaos, guys. It's like no business throwing that football. And then Mooney made it right. And kudos to Mooney on that particular play. But then thereafter you saw Kirk kind of trying to force some of those balls down the field to Darnell Mooney. It was like it didn't work outside of that one time. And it's like up to that touchdown, like I think Mooney had 6 targets, 6 catches, 64 yards. after that touchdown, he had like 11 targets, 5 catches, 47 yards. And so there's a disparity. And like those 6 times, that's what I'm talking about. Those 6 times where he didn't catch the ball, a lot of those were back shoulder stuff. And it's like, these aren't Darnell Mooney plays, right? And that's kind of that's the good and bad what you get with Darnell Mooney, right? And it's like half of the film from Thursday night is like, hey, Aaron Freeman, person who was like, Darnell Mooney's really a number 3 wide receiver, not a true blue number 2 wide receiver, is dead wrong when you watch like 6 of those catches, or however many catches it was. And then half of the film is like, no, this is exactly what I was talking about, why I didn't have him rated as high as other people. And so it's like, it's a tale of 2 Moonies, right? And so like the other way I would explain it, right? Like, think back to another Falcons wide receiver that Falcons signed in free agency that I wasn't a big fan of, Mohamed Sanu, right? Infamous for my Mohamed Sanu hatred. But like, there were certain things that Mohamed Sanu was very good at, right? Moving the chains, bodying smaller finesse nickel corners, blocking, trick plays, throwing the football. Great quarterback, right? But like, Mohamed Sanu was not a deep threat, right? And so to me, it's like the idea of certain things that you do with Darnell Mooney are like throwing a deep ball to Mohamed Sanu. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You have Julio Jones, you have Taylor Gabriel, you have Zac Robinson, you have Calvin Ridley on your team. These are the guys that you should be throwing deep passes to, not Mohamed Sanu. And so like, for me, with like the back shoulder stuff to Darnell Mooney, it's like Drake London is a back shoulder guy. Like, that's the best thing that Drake London does. And like, to design up back shoulder throws to Darnell Mooney, to me, is just like, this is the wrong way to use Darnell Mooney, right? This is the right way to use Drake London. So if I want to throw a back shoulder fade to somebody, or a deep comeback or something like that, I'm throwing that to Drake London. I'm not throwing that to Darnell Mooney. And so that's where my issues with Darnell Mooney come from, where it's just like, it feels like the Falcons are trying to make fetch happen, right? And it's like, just stop trying to make fetch happen. Like, it's not going to happen with, again, certain things that Darnell Mooney does, great. Other things that Darnell Mooney's like, So I'm just saying, like, lean into the good half with Darnell Mooney. That's all I'm asking. Because it's a frustrating watch where I'm like, hey, this is Darnell Mooney proving me wrong. And then it's like, this is Darnell Mooney proving me right. And it's just like, you got to find that balance, right? And or you don't need to find a balance. Just go all in on the good stuff that makes, proves me wrong about Darnell Mooney. That's basically what I'm getting at. So like, Darnell Mooney's definitely deserves credit. But at the same time, I'm like, every time I'm watching them try to throw these back shoulder fades, I'm like, stop doing this. Stop running swing passes to Darnell Mooney. Stop trying to make him into the true blue all around number 2, number 1 wide receiver. Like, he has a specific skill set, just like Mohamed Sanu. Like, don't throw deep passes to Mohamed Sanu. Like, that's dumb. Stop doing that. And again, like, the Falcons didn't really do that when Mohamed Sanu was there. That's why like the offense worked. So it's really about knowing your personnel. And speaking of knowing your personnel, the Falcons finally got Kyle Pitts involved. Right, it was debatable whether I'm wrong on Darnell Mooney, but it's not debatable whether I was right about Kyle Pitts getting him more involved. And good things tend to happen when you do that, right? And we saw the Falcons dial up that big play to Kyle Pitts early. We saw him get him regularly involved, check downs, other ways of getting him involved in the offense. And like, to me, it essentially boils like, especially with the Falcons and their struggles to be explosive through the first month of the season, like, ignoring Pitts in the ways that they have been doing, to me, just didn't make any sense, right? And we talked about that last week, which is this, through the first 4 games of the season, this was the least explosive the Falcons had been through the first month of the season since I've been tracking that information since 2010 in terms of generating 20-plus yard plays. And so it's basically, using a golf analogy, you have this club in your bag. It's Kyle Pitts, and you have an explosive play or 2 in your bag for Kyle Pitts, and you're just leaving that club in your bag. And it would be fine if you're hitting, with other clubs, right? If the Falcons offense was being this super explosive offense, and with Darnell Mooney, with Drake London, with, other pieces, Ray-Ray McCloud, et cetera, it'd be fine. Okay, well, we can leave that club, that Kyle Pitts club, in our bag because we don't need it, right? We're doing just fine. But you weren't doing just fine without. And so that was kind of the point. It was like, you need to get this guy involved in your offense. And if you're not, you're just wasting all this potential. And that's basically what I was getting at in the lead up to last week. And so it's nice to sort of see the Falcons taking advantage of that potential. Are we going to see this from Kyle Pitts every single week? Probably not. But at least now we can feel like, okay, we know how to use this club, hopefully. And the Falcons will continue to take advantage of that. So we'll see if the Falcons will stop wasting Kyle Pitts' potential. But speaking of wasted potential, let's talk about the defense. A A lot of wasted potential on the defense side of the ball. We'll talk about why the Falcons got better in the second half against the Bucs and why, despite that improvement, I still have a beef with the Falcons defensive scheme. So we'll break all that down as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So NFL fans, start your season with a big return over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page where you place your bets. And you can get started with a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel's going to give you $200 just placing any $5 bet, right? And whether you want to bet on, NFL football, college football, Major League Baseball playoffs, whatever you're into, FanDuel has got you covered. Just head on over to FanDuel.com. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So the question is, why did the Falcons defense get better in the second half? And it would be easy to just say, they made adjustments, right? Watching the film, it didn't feel like, charting the defense, that it was really adjustments. But given that Raheem Morris, has a track record of making good adjustments during his time as a defensive coordinator in LA, it's understandable why people would just assume like that followed him to Atlanta. And generally speaking, through the first 5 games, the Falcons defense has been much better later in games, especially in the fourth quarter. And so they're doing something. And so credit does go to this coaching staff for doing whatever they're doing, whether it's, I don't know if it's schematic adjustments, but just like, I don't know, vibes. I don't know. The vibes are better in the second half than they are in the first half. Is basically what I would boil it down to. But, I don't know if there's any specific thing that I can say like, oh, they made this adjustment and that's what fixed it. Now, maybe to my unexpert eyes, like there's something I'm missing watching the film. But to me, their improved performance in the second half against the Bucs basically boiled down to defensive players making plays, which we'll get into, my issues with the scheme. But for the most part, the Falcons were able to get stops in the second half because guys in the front seven especially stepped up in a major way. Or, the Bucs kind of shot themselves in the foot because, a holding call really kind of killed them on the opening drive in the second half. And then, of course, the final drive in the second half in the fourth quarter, two holding calls kind of killed both of those drives for them. But in between that, you saw Grady Jarrett making plays, right? Where the Falcons were able to get some stops on early downs against the run because Grady Jarrett was knifing into the backfield. You saw David Onyemata and Matt Jujon and Caden Ellis all make plays, come up big on critical downs with a sack or a pressure, right? I counted 6 pressures from Jujon in the second half of this game, including that holding call on the opening drive in the third quarter that he drew on Justin Skule, the Bucs right tackle. And so, like, to me, their defensive success was like, hey, guys made plays. Now, the reason why I think that is because, in general, watching 5 games now of this defensive scheme, I'm not in love with the scheme. I think it's a little soft. I think it's a little too willing to concede yards, both against the run and in the pass. Right, too many easy completions on early downs. And I looked up the stats this week after the Thursday night game that the Falcons are facing 3rd and short, where the opposing team has either 1, 2, or 3 yards to go to convert on 3rd down, on 49% of their 3rd downs, which is by far the most in the NFL. The NFL average of 3rd and shorts is about 29% heading into this Sunday's games. And, the Falcons are giving up a first down on those 3rd and shorts only about 58% of the time, and the NFL average is about 57% of the time. So basically, what I'm saying, what the stats are telling you is that if the Falcons could get into normal 3rd down and distance, then there's every reason to think that this Falcons defense will be an average to above average 3rd down defense rather than the 27th ranked 3rd down defense that they were headed into Sunday's week 5 action. Right. And so the reason why the Falcons get into, or opposing teams get into so many 3rd and shorts, is because they can run the ball effectively on early downs because of all the reasons that we talked about, where the Falcons are kind of soft against the run. And they're able to easily complete passes on early downs, given, short passes, given all the off coverage that the Falcons play, right? The Falcons are giving up the 2nd highest completion rate in the NFL at 74%, heading into week 5 Sunday games. And this was especially an issue against Kansas City and New Orleans, that were just basically like, okay, if you're going to concede easy 5 to 7 yard completions to us, we'll take those. And now the Bucs were less willing to take those. And maybe that's contributed to a factor in why they lost this game. But they didn't, in the first half, they didn't really need to take those because they were able to get the 10 to 15 yard completions on a pretty regular basis, for various reasons. And, all of this is part of the Falcons bend but don't break style of defense. And I get it. But like, to me, that style of defense worked in LA. I think like basically the conclusion I'm reaching after watching 5 games is like, because they had Aaron Donald. And the hope is that, Matthew Judon, Grady Jarrett, and David Onyemata could combine to be equal one Aaron Donald. And in the second half of this game, I think they did. But if they're not looking that sort of like those type of dominant, disruptive players, then I don't know if the scheme works, right? Because otherwise the ball's getting out too quickly. It's making it hard for the pass rush to get home. It's one of the reasons why, to me, the pass rush has been ineffective. And, if you played more press coverage, I think you could do a better job disrupting the timing of the offense and buy the pass rush more time to get home on some of those plays. But, it is what it is. So to me, this defense is good when individual players step up and make plays, whether that's, Caden Ellis get a timely third down, because like there's sack that they got, the David Onyemata sack was like a 3-man rush. Like the Caden Ellis pressure that they got on the third down that led to a Baker scramble on like a 3rd and long. That was, I think, a 3-man rush as well. So like, like you're not, I don't know. That's why, like, I don't know if like, oh man, the Falcons are genius by rushing 3 guys. I don't know if that's a great adjustment, but it is what it is. But, we've talked a lot about why the run defense struggles because they don't have enough beef up front. And to me, I think the pass defense would struggle less if they were more willing to play press coverage. And so that's why, like, I don't love the scheme because it feels like a lot of the Falcons' issues when it comes to their defense, whether it's, giving up too many easy throws, easy runs, and struggling on third down, to me are self-inflicted wounds due to question marks that I have with the scheme. But we'll see if the Falcons' defense can continue to make progress again. Credit goes to, I think, the individual players, the Onyematas, the Judons, the Ellises, the Grady Jarretts, Jesse Bates with his timely, forced fumble, all that stuff. Those guys making plays. And we'll see if those guys, as they get more comfortable in the scheme, will they continue to make plays and therefore, mask over whatever issues I have with the scheme. We'll see if the Falcons make adjustments as the season wears on and, change how they want to play. We'll see. So all of that's in store. We'll always be keeping you locked here on Locked On Falcons. If you want to get visual examples of all the things I've talked about on today's episode, why not become a Locked On Falcons insider so you get access to the extended All-22 review, where I'll be showing you HD All-22 film of some of the plays that I'm talking about. We'll be breaking down the good and bad of Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, the defense, maybe even sprinkle in some special teams plays, why the kickoff coverage was not great in this game. So hopefully that issue will resolve itself once Bradley Pinion's back healthy and kicking off again, because we love it, Younghoe Koo, but my man cannot kick off the football. This is basically what I say. They just kick touchbacks because our coverage unit was very rough in this game. It's basically so we'll probably break that down on the extended All-22 review. And you become a Locked On Falcons insider by hitting the link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. You get access to all my extended All-22 reviews, all my video content, as well as my thoughts on game day. I'm hitting those folks up. I'm not live tweeting the games, but the Locked On Falcons insiders are getting my minute by minute thoughts on the game live. And it's a 14-day free trial. Then it's $4.99 a month after that. So sign up, try it out for 14 days. If you like it, keep it. If you don't, no harm, no foul. So hit that link in the description below to check that out, that extended All-22 review, which probably will be dropping Sunday night or Monday morning, probably Monday morning. Now I sit here, look at the clock. But that's it, guys. Appreciate you. Continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen by subscribing and following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out Locked On NFL as your second listen. Get those 2 shows daily to get you recaps for the other 30 teams or 26 teams, or however many it is, that played on Sunday. And so, of course, Tony Wiggins, Tyler Rowland will keep you covered twice daily on Locked On NFL to going on for the other 30 teams, even those that didn't play, all in store for you on Locked On NFL. It's Find it on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every